Hi and welcome back to another video of jPlay. I am Marcus and today I want to do a playthrough of Prehistory, which is about to launch on Kickstarter anytime soon. Today's episode will be somewhat of a premiere because I'm really planning to do this full playthrough in one single episode, so bear with me. I will definitely be doing some rules mistakes and I will not be able to correct them from episode to episode. Maybe or hopefully I will catch some of the errors during editing and will leave some comments, but apart from that it's very unlikely I will be able to correct them properly. So yeah, let's see how this turns out. In Prehistory, 2 to 4 players represent prehistoric tribes which need to gather food, paint those rock paintings up there, do fishing or hunting, and having a good time with some ceremonial dancing. As we are still gatherers, we also have to move on this map here in order to gather some more resources here, hunt some animals or prey next to those monoliths here, or build additional campsites. The game has some serious footprint on your gaming table. That's a setup for a 3-player game. I'm really not sure if I would have been able to perform a 4-player playthrough today. Apparently everything that you see here is a prototype, so things may look a little bit more polished in the final product. Right now it's looking pretty decent already, but yeah, just to let you know that the final product may or may not look like a little bit different than what you see here. The game is played over 5 rounds, pretty much a year. Each round or year consists of 4 seasons, starting with winter. And whoever has the most amount of victory by the end of the 5th year is clearly the most powerful tribe and wins this game of Prehistory. You start each year with winter. As we already did that as part of the setup, we can more or less skip the winter phase, so we can directly jump into the spring phase, which means that each player has to move his weather tile 1 space in clockwise direction. And whatever numbers you're seeing here, those are the resources that the player can use during this pretty much spring season. So in this case, the red player will get 2 gray resources, 0 red resources, 3 brown resources, 1 white resource and 1 blue resource, and 0 of those yellow resources. There is a difference between actual resources which are stored on this 10 space on your player board here versus action markers which are stored below your rock painting section of your game board. You will pretty much use the same stones in the end, but depending on where you store them, you would use them quite differently. So resources are usually only used during springtime. You can also use them later on when you move on the map, but I come to that in a second. And whereas you are using those action markers which are here only during the summer phase, and those action markers are also victory points by the end of the game. But for now we only have 7 resources. The same is true for the blue player here, who also has 7 resources, but in a slightly different combination, and you are basically can pick and choose the starting position of your weather tile as part of setup. And here are the resources for spring for the yellow player. Then it's already time to perform the first action round. The action round in spring works slightly different than the action round during summer. You will do pretty much the same actions, but they will be triggered somewhat differently. So the red player would start, and I think he wants to do some hunting because there are some nice tracks here for mammoths, for example. There are also some actual animals, but sometimes those tracks, especially when getting those early in the game, may give you some additional benefits when going for those. So I think I'm either going for this mammoth or for this rhino here. Doesn't really matter at this point in time, but of course we first have to trigger that action. How is that done? We will look at this central pricing tile here. It looks like Stonehenge somewhat. In order to do a hunting action in springtime, we have to look where the hunting symbol right now is. Right now that's here on this pillars here, and in order to trigger that, you can now place any one resource onto one of those columns here, and I think I want to go with a brown resource. It doesn't really matter, so I could also have played a yellow resource here, for example. At this point in time it doesn't really matter. This now allows me to trigger the hunting action, and in order to get this rhino here I have to pay 1 additional resource to find the tracks of that rhino. So what do I have to pay for this actually? And that's written on this pricing tile. The top 3 icons, so this is really divided here. These 3 icons are for the fishing actions, those 3 icons are for the hunting actions. So I can now pay either a red, a white or a brown resource in order to get those tracks. And I think in this case let's go for for the brown one here, doesn't really matter. I can really mix and match. I only needed one resource in order to get this or find those rhino tracks here. So let's grab those. Let's put them next to our player board. And I immediately gain this bonus here, which is a development point. And development points are awesome in this game because you can use them for various things. You can turn those pricing tiles, for example. So if you have to pay for a resource, but you don't have the resource, then you can basically turn those tiles either clockwise or counterclockwise. You can move them later on to move your tribes or your meeples on the map. You can gain resource from that. Really great. Having those development points is really great. And every 3 development point by the end of the game is also worth 1 victory point. But then it's the blue player's turn, and I think he also wants to do some hunting because this mammoth up there is also quite nice. So again, we trigger the hunting action here. This time he's paying with a red cube here. Now this action is gone for the spring because both of those columns are already populated with resources, so no other player can go there, but that's still okay for the blue player. And in order to find those tracks, he also has to pay a resource, either red, white or brown. I think in this case, let's go for a red one. This goes simply to the bank, so he's allowed to get those tracks. Let's place it next to the playboard. He also gains a reward here, another development point for the blue player as well, which isn't a bad thing. And then it's the yellow player, and I think he wants to do some dancing here in order to get this ceremonial card up there, which gives him pretty much 3 victory points for each of those sets that he may be able to collect throughout the game. Gaining those cards, especially those cards early in the game, really gives you a clear goal on what to collect throughout the game, and 3 points is really not a bad thing here. Right now all of the players have 3 shamans around this campfire here, and in order to produce pretty much one of those ceremonial points which we need in order to get this card, we have to pretty much move one of those shamans to one empty spot here. In this case, I think he can easily move, for example, this guy here. Let's take him, pay 1 brown resource and move his guy here. Now he produced 1 ceremonial point. This goes back right to the bank. Of course, we also have to pay to trigger that action. In this case, we want to do the campfire or the ceremonial action, so we place a stone next to the appropriate action. It doesn't really matter the color of the stone during spring. So we already paid this resource, and this gives us the, let's say, access to this card, which we would place next to the player board of the yellow player. It doesn't really provide any immediate benefit, so it's pretty much an end game scoring goal. Then it's back to the red player, and I think red wants to do some rock painting here. Rock painting is currently here, so in order to trigger that, he pays 1 resource. Again, it doesn't have to be the gray one, and this allows him to do some rock painting. In total, each of the players have 9 sections on their rock painting stone here, and I think he wants to pay this section of the rock painting here. This includes 2 symbols, so the, let's say, the reddish hand and this Mustang, which is pretty much this tile here. So we need the hand. For the hand we need to pay with a gray resource, and we need this Mustang with a brown resource. Now we paid our resource, so this allows us to place this section of the rock painting onto our player board. Right now it doesn't do a thing, but later on it's also an endgame scoring. For each row that you complete, you get 6 points. For 2 in a row, you get 3 points, and for 1, let's say, section in each single row, you still get 1 point. So overall, he already scored 1 victory point by placing this tile here on the rock painting. One thing I nearly forgot for the yellow player, of course, when he did his ceremonial action, he was allowed to place his small disc here next to the player order track. So if the round would end like this, the yellow player would be the starting player for the next round, but there are some ways in order to change that for the other players. But then it's blue, and I think blue wants to do some gathering. Gathering is here, so let's place a stone onto this column of that section here. And now we have to look at the gathering section right now. So I think he really wants to go for either one of those resources here. And I think he wants to pay with a yellow resource. So this allows him to grab this here gathering token, which he will place onto his game board here. And whenever you have a pair of those, you also get those action markers immediately. And because this shows a development symbol, blue also got an additional development point. And with 2 development points, or you can trade in 2 development points into any one of those resources. So this is really, really huge already. I think yellow wants to do the same. He also will do some gathering. So let's place a stone here. But because of his ceremonial card, I think he wants to go for those nuts here. So I think he will pay 1 white resource in order to claim this token. He could have gone for one of those in order to get a development point. But because of his card, I think he's really after those nuts, which he will always also place on his player board. Back to red, and I think he wants to do some rock painting again. So he will pay 1 blue resource, but he really wants to have this black hand here. Unfortunately, he only has a white stone left. So what he can do now is to pay 1 development point, which allows him to move one of those pricing tiles clockwise or counterclockwise. In this case, he wants to move it counterclockwise. So right now, that's perfect. So the white resource now gives him the black hand he needs, which brings him from 1 to 3 victory points already by the end of the game. And now he has pretty much made a connection. So we look for the bonus in this row here, and the bonus for connecting 2 tiles is 2 development points, which he gets right away. Nice job, red. The center section of the board gets pretty crowded already, but still blue has more than enough stone. So I think it may be a good idea to do a fishing action. So he will spend a red stone here, and in order to go fishing, you have to pay with the resources that are printed on the bottom of this pricing tile here. Right now there are only fishes worth 1 or 3. There are also fishes normally in the deck that have show 2, and this is basically the perfect thing. Right now they are not on the board yet. You can only go for 1 fish, so in this case he will pay 1 blue resource in order to grab this fish. This simply goes to his or next to his player board, but this also allows him to advance on this fishing track here. And whenever you jump over those milestones here, this is really something that you get by the end of each summer phase. So it would really be cool if you would have been able to catch a fish worth 2, but yeah, unfortunately that was not the case here. Then it's back to the yellow player, and I think he wants to migrate, which means to move meeples to the map. So let's trigger the migrate action with any 1 resource like so. Then you can either spend those 2 resources or those 2 resources to migrate up to 3 meeples to the map, or one of those resources in order to migrate 1 meeple onto the map. Right now he basically only has this brown. He has a yellow one, but this yellow one isn't any good for him. But this allows him to take one of his 2 meeples that he still has on his player board, and this lets him move his 2nd meeple onto the main map on the board. Then I think all the players will pass, so we will move into the summer phase. So all of those resources will slide up into this center or top piece of each of those columns. And then starting with the last player, all the players can now choose one of those sections here. And I think yellow wants to go for this section here. We will place those stones now on the action marker section of the game board. So those are no longer resources, those are now action markers. Again, they are worth 1 victory point by the end of the game, but you can use them throughout the summer in order to trigger actions. Yellow still has this yellow resource. They don't go bad, so you can reuse them for the next round, for example, or you can also use them later on to move on the map. Yeah, let's wait and see. Then it's the blue player, and I think blue wants to go for this section here, and red, I think he also will go for, let's say, a section with 3 stones, which gives you really some more flexibility. Maybe not for this round, but maybe for the next one. And then during summer we go through all of those actions again, but now we start here with the rock painting section on the board. The red player doesn't have any gray action markers, so he pretty much has to pass for this action, but blue does. And I think he wants to pay 2 of those gray resources. Now those colors don't matter at all. You really have to spend those gray stones. He pretty much paid for 2 symbols, and I think he wants to go for this, I don't know, is it a cow, and this river symbol here, which he will place onto his player board. Then it's the yellow player. He also doesn't have any gray resource, so we can move over to the gathering action. Here you have to pay 2 red resources in order to get any one of those tokens here. Unfortunately, none of the player doesn't have 2 red resources, so they all have to pass. Of course, you could still trade in your development points, and that's a 3-to-1 now. So in order to get an
action marker, you need to spend 3 development points. None of the player has 3 development points, so we can totally skip that action here. Then we go dancing, again starting with a red player. He could now spend 1, 2 or 3 yellow resources. Now those guys don't move at all. You simply have to pay the yellow action markers. Again, not resources, action markers now. But right now he's really not interested in those end game scoring cards. This is basically the only one he could afford, but he's not really basically fancying this, so maybe he will pass. The same is true for the blue and the yellow player, who doesn't have any yellow stones for this round. So let's move over to the fishing action here. Now you have to pay blue action markers here. Right now the only player who has blue action markers is the blue player, and yeah, he will totally pay a blue action marker, and this will give him a second fish pretty much, which would let him advance on this fishing track once more. So by the end of this summer phase he will get a victory point, because he was basically brave enough to go there in the first place during spring. Nice job. After fishing it's hunting, so the only player who has brown stones in order to go hunting is the yellow player, and I think he wants to go hunting, so he will now pay 2 brown resources, which is here. Now he can either go for this saber tooth or this rhino footprints up there, and I think right now it may be really a better idea to go for those rhinos here. Let's go for it. This gives him 1 red resources right from the bat, which he either can use during the next spring or maybe later on when traveling on the map. Last action during summer is the migration action. Now you have to spend white action markers. Right now none of the players does have white action markers. Blue has a white stone though, but this is a resource, not an action marker. Everything that's stored here is a resource. Here down there are action markers, and it's maybe a little bit confusing when reading through the rules the first time, and maybe they are considering to maybe do several tokens for those later on in the final product of the game, but when you really played it 2 or 3 times you are pretty clear what those are. But right now he cannot spend those or this white stone for an action marker, because again it's a resource. So all the players have to pass at the migration action. After those actions we still get our fishing income, and the only player who has advanced on the fishing track is the blue player. So blue pretty much gets his first victory point. Hooray! After summer we come to autumn. So now we can move our meeples here on the map. In order to move your meeples you pretty much have to generate movement points. And you get those movement points by converting either your resources or your action markers into basically the appropriate sections here on the central pricing tile. So if whatever red player would now spend a brown resource or a brown action marker, he now would generate 3 movement points altogether. In this case you can also spend your development points, so 1 development point equals 1 movement point, and you don't have to spend any resources or action markers at all, so you can only move by spending development points. Red goes first, and I think red wants to make sure to gain those resources up there, so he needs to generate 2 movement points, and basically he pays 1 red and 1 yellow, which are both only 1 movement point altogether. So he will now be allowed to move his meeple 1, 2 spaces here. We lay him down to show that this meeple already has moved, so you can only move your meeple only once during the autumn phase. He's now allowed to gain this tile here, which also gives him a development point because it showed a development point. And in theory red could move on right now, but unfortunately he's out of meeple, so that's pretty much the end for his autumn phase. Next would be blue. Blue is also down to only 1 meeple on the central map, and I think he wants to generate 2 movement points by spending a white resource here. So let's have his blue meeple move 1, 2 spaces here onto this animal tile. So he will now allowed to gain this tile, which is worth an immediate 1 victory point. Hoo-hoo, he's chasing to the lead. But what's also important, he pretty much has found the animal to those tracks here. And at the end of the game, you pretty much multiply the sum of all of your tracks that belong to a particular animal and multiply those with the sum of all your victory points of those animal points. Right now, it's only 1 times 1, so 1 victory point. But if I would be able to find more mammoths later on and more of those tracks, this number could really go up significantly by the end of the game. And then it's yellow. He wants to create 1 movement point in order to move this meeple here. There he wants to create a camp, and each of the players has, I think, 6 or 7 of those camps, 7 camp tokens right now. In order to build those camps, you need pretty much workers. In order to build this camp here, you need to have 2 workers that are pretty much adjacent to each other, and keep in mind movement. You can move through other meeples, but you can never end your movement on the same space as another meeple or with a foreign campsite here. So in this case, that's perfectly fine. So in order to build this camp, we need 2 meeples that are adjacent, so one on the campsite space apparently. One of those meeples, unfortunately, is a black one, so he will be sent back to the player board, but that's not really a bad thing. So this guy moved anyway, so we are now allowed to flip this camp. This gives the yellow player an immediate 2 victory points and 1 development point, which we will definitely score right now. And on top of this, each camp you build gives you 1 additional meeple from outside of your resource. You can never have more than 10 meeples all basically in game, so you have 7 of those campsites. And yeah, that's pretty much cool for the yellow player. He's not done yet. He can still move his second meeple here, and I think he wants to do that. So first of all, he will generate yet another point here. That's only 1 movement point. And on top of this, he will also spend his one and only development point. So that's 2 movement points in total. And I think I want to move the yellow meeple 2 spaces here. And this now is the yellow monolith, and this allows me to take this monolith. It's pretty much worth 2 victory points by the end of the game. Nice job, yellow. That was the first year. We come into the second year, so we will replace the central pricing tile and replace it with a new one here. We will always place the, let's say, bluish surrounded one facing up north pretty much. You will never allow to change the direction of the central pricing tile, also not with development action. So this is pretty much showing you also how many rounds you have already played this round. Let's replenish the gathering tokens here accordingly. Let's send him more fish. Of course, we can show what fish are out there. Okay, now we do have some fish that are worth 2 points. And on top of this, we will also discard all of those hunting cards and reveal a new one. And we will do the same with the ceremonial cards here accordingly. So let's replenish those as well. Then we set the new turn order for this round. The yellow player was the only player to dance, so he will go first, and all the other players will pretty much keep their relative positions like this. And one thing I nearly forgot was to place some new tokens here according to the position of this new central pricing tile like this. And then we should be go into the second year. In spring, all the players will turn their weather tile accordingly. Now you can also spend a resource or development point in order to basically spin it before, but in this case you can only move it clockwise direction. But I think red is fine, so he will now start the spring season with 2 reds and so on. I will do that off camera. And then yellow will start the spring season because he's the new starting player. And I think the first thing that he wants to do is to do a gathering action. So he will place a white stone here, and I think he really wants to go for either one of those. So he will spend the gray resource here in order to get those beans. Those beans doesn't do him any good in respect to fulfilling his mission card, and those cards are normally face down, by the way. But he now created this pair, and this pair gives him a white and a brown action stone for the summer phase. So this is extremely powerful, and on top of this he also gains an additional development point, which is always a good thing. Red wants to do painting, so he will pay a white resource as well. And I think he wants to go for this one single symbol here. That's a red resource he has to pay. So therefore, he's now allowed to grab this hunter, which he will place next to his rock painting here. Unfortunately, he's only adjacent to 1 tiles right now, but it still gives him 2 additional development points. And yeah, this row is now worth 6 points by the end of the game. Last but not least, it's blue, and blue wants to do hunting, and the idea is to get this tile here. Therefore, he will spend 2 brown resources. He could go for either combination. He could pay a brown and a white, 2 white, red and a brown, whatever is up here. But this allows him to grab this tracks card here, which he will place next to his existing tracks of this mammoth here. And now all of those benefits will trigger again. First of all, he get 1 gray resource for this tile, but he also can trigger this tracks card here as well. So therefore, he just got an additional development point. And now this combination is also worth 2 points. So pretty much sum up those multipliers here. That's 2 times 1. It's 2 victory points. Awesome. Yellow wants to do gathering again, so he will spend 1 resource here, and I think this time he wants to go for the honey. So he will spend this red resource in order to grab this tile, which helps him to complete his card here. So he already has the nuts, he has the honey, and then he needs those, I think those are olives or something like that. So right now he's not doing bad. Red wants to hunt, so he will spend a blue resource and he will spend 2 wise resources here, and he will totally go for this rhino here. As he already has rhino tracks, both those trigger again, so he gets a white resource, always a good thing, and he will also get yet another development point for this. Blue wants to do fishing, so he will spend a brown resource here in order to trigger that action, and he wants to go for a level 2 fish here, so he will spend 2 gray resources because he has a lot of gray resources, so he will get this fish. This would let him move 1-2 spaces here, so by the end of this summer he would get a victory point and a development point each round now, which is really great. Then it's yellow, and I think yellow wants to dance, so he will move one of his shamans into this area here, so this is gone pretty much. And of course he has to spend 1 stone next to the dancing action accordingly. And I think he will go for this ceremonial card here, which would be worth 5 victory points by the end of the game if he would have this pattern, or at least this pattern on the game board. If he would be able to complete all 9 of this token, this would count as well, of course. Red wants to do fishing, so he will spend 1 white resource here. Right now he only has a yellow and a red resource, but he really wants to go for a level 2 fish down there. So I think he will spend 1 development point in order to turn this pricing tile 1 space counterclockwise. You can do that with those turners here. And therefore he will now spend a red and a yellow resource, and this will give him this fish, so he will also advance on this track here according, so at least he will also score some victory points by the end of each turn. Blue wants to paint, I believe, so he will now spend his yellow resource here, and I think he wants to go for this Mustang, so he will have to pay a blue resource as well. This gives him the Mustang. He will place it like this, and now those guys are adjacent, so he gets one of those column here, and this is a white action marker which he can use during summer or during the autumn phase, which is nice. Yellow is down to 1 resource, and he cannot spend any development points in order to generate additional resources, so I think he has to pass for this spring, but he can still use this resource for movement or maybe for the next spring phase. But all the other players are basically out of resources too, and I think they don't want to do anything else. They want to hold on to the development points, so let's go into summer. Let's slide all of those resources up, which are now pretty much have become action markers, and now blue has first tips on what to go for, and I think blue wants to get those stones here. Then it's red, and I think red will also go for 4 action markers, and I guess yellow takes this one here. Let's do the summer actions. Yellow doesn't have any gray stones, so he cannot do this action. Then it's red, and I think red wants to pay a red action marker now in order to paint this hand here. So let's place this accordingly. Right now, this row will score him 1 additional point. So overall, he already scored 7 victory points in total here, which isn't a bad thing. And if he would be able now to place this section of the rock painting, he would trigger basically this effect twice, so he would gain 2 times this yellow action marker, which is nice. Then it's blue. I think blue also wants to spend a gray action marker, and he will paint this hunter, which he will place accordingly, and therefore he just scored an additional white action marker. Awesome. Then we would move to the gathering action. Unfortunately, again, neither of the players has 2 red resources, so we can directly skip over this and come to the ceremony action. Yellow is out of yellow action markers here, so it's either red or blue. Red does have 1, but unfortunately there aren't any cards which he could get for only 1 dancing action, but I think he will spend 1, and on top of this he will also spend 1, 2, 3 development points, and this will give him 1 yellow action marker, or pretty much an action marker of his choice. So now he does have 2 yellow action markers, and I think he wants to go for this ceremonial tile because first of all it gives him 1 additional development point, and for each 2 fish he has by the end of the game, this would give him an additional 1 victory point, which is not too shabby. And keep in mind, he already has 1 of those fish, so that's already 1 victory point, and of course we must not forget to give him 1 development point back. Blue also has only one yellow action marker, so I think he doesn't want to do dancing again. He could also trade in some development points, but I think he'd rather not. Again, I believe I forgot to place those discs next to the ceremonial action. I think the first one to go there was the yellow player, but then it was the red player. 2 cards on mission, so we should be good in respect to that, but it really doesn't change the turn order anyway. Then it's time to do some fishing, and I think yellow wants to do some fishing. So he will spend 1 blue action marker in order to gain this fish token here. This lets him move 1 space here. Then it's the red player, and I think red wants to do the same, and they only do that in order to pretty much prevent that blue would gain this 1 single fish here. So he will also grab it. He will advance here as well. And in theory, blue could do the same. The problem is he only has 1 blue action marker here, and he doesn't have enough development points in order to cash in 2 times those action markers. So he has to pass this round. Really nasty. Then it's hunting time. Yellow will go first, and I think he wants to spend 2 brown resource, and I think he will go for this Trex card here of this saber tooth, and therefore he gets an additional brown resource which he can use during autumn or next spring season. Blue only has 1 red action marker, and both cards that are left up here cost 3 of those brown resource, and I think again he doesn't have enough development points in order to exchange those, so he has to pass. Let's do some migration, and yellow totally wants to pay 2 white action markers in order to migrate 2 of his meeples onto the map. He can basically have them start in his new camp or here at the central location, but they all have to go to the same location, and I think, why not? Let's send both of these dudes here to the central camp tile. Red will also spend 1 right action marker in order to send 1 of his meeples to the central map. And again, keep in mind, only when spawning those guys onto the map, they can be on the same tile. Later on, when they move, they will never be allowed to move or end their movement on the same tile as another meeple. This doesn't really matter which color that meeple is. Blue is also all for meeple power, so he will also spend 2 white action markers in order to send his 2 meeples onto the map. And of course, they will also go to the central tile here on the map. Let's do some after summer scoring again. Blue gets 1 victory point and 1 development point, which is not bad. But red also gets his very first victory point. Hooray! Let's go into summer, and again we can now generate movement points. So yellow is now worth 3 movement points, brown 1, red 2, and so on. Yellow will go first, and he will generate 2 movement points because he wants to have this rhino. So he will move 1, 2 spaces here. This gives him the rhino he needs, therefore he scores an immediate victory point, and on top of this his tracks are now worth at least 1 victory point, which is not a bad thing. By the way, those monoliths here pretty much score you 1 victory point for each meeple or tent that's around it by the end of the game. So right now this monolith would be worth 2 victory points for the yellow player. It's really counted for each hack, so right now the blue player would only score 1 victory point here. And on top of this, there are also those monoliths here where majorities count, and again the majorities around the monolith here. So the first player who has the most one gets 5 victory points, the second player gets 2 victory points. In case of a tie, those numbers are halved and rounded down. Yellow is still not done yet. He will generate 2 more movement points, and I think the idea is to move this meeple 1, 2 spaces here in order to create another camp. This camp only needs 1 meeple, and it's a gray meeple, so he can leave him where it is. So let's flip him over, but this guy or this tent only gives him 1 development point, but of course he will take it anyway. But what's also important, he gets an additional meeple. Last but not least, he will spend a development point in order to move his last remaining meeple onto this space here. And this space gives him an immediate gray action marker. Pretty much he could use it right away, but all of his meeples already have moved, and I think he really wants to hold on to this for the next summer round. I think red really wants to have this rhino here, so he will also generate 2 movement points with this red resource here, 1, 2 spaces. So let's grab this. By the way, this is pretty much, let's call it a misprint from, let's say, an older version of the game. The later version of the game will really show this animal symbols on top of this. So right now, this doesn't give us anything additional. Once this animal is hunted, this tile is pretty much an empty one. But of course, this rhino will give the red player an immediate victory point. I think red wants to pass for the remainder of this autumn phase, so it's over to the blue player, and blue really wants to have this mammoth upstairs. So he needs to generate 4 movement points in order to get that. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is 3, and he will also spend an additional development point. Right now he's still, I think, at 3 or 4 of those. So this is now 4 movement points. 1, 2, 3, 4. This will give him the mammoth here, an immediate victory point as well. But what's really more important is that he has now 2 of those mammoths. So it's 2 times 2, though this combination is now worth 4 victory points by the end of the game, and that's really not too shabby. I think blue wants to generate yet another movement point with this action marker in order to move in here, and the idea is pretty much to build a camp there, and I guess he will go for this camp. This camp unfortunately has to send back the meeple that build it, but at least it's worth 2 victory points, so blue is definitely not complaining about this. He still has 1 more meeple left, but I think he wants to pass as well. So this was already the end of the autumn. So again, we will move into the next winter of the next year, and we'll prepare the game board accordingly. And again, we move into the spring phase, so all the players will move their weather tile accordingly, and then they get their resources. And again, I will do that off camera. And then it's time to do some spring actions. Yellow is first, or still the starting player, and I think he wants to do some dancing. So he will place a blue resource cube here. He will pay another blue resource cube in order to have this guy, I don't know, let's dance over here. This is pretty much 1 dancing point, and with that he's going to get 1 of those rhino tracks here. So let's grab it, let's put it next to his existing rhino prints again. This will trigger again, giving him 1 red resource for this round. Nice. And this time I'm really trying to remember to place the small token next to the starting player track. Then it's the red player, and I think he wants to do some painting. Yeah, let's go for it. So he will place a blue resource like this. He wants to have basically those 2 icons. The idea is really to paint this part of his rock painting. Therefore, I think he needs to spend 1 development point to move this guy here counterclockwise. And now he has to paint gray and a brown resource in order to get this piece of his rock painting. And hooray! He managed to grab this piece. Now he made 2 connections, which pretty much means he gets 2 action markers, which he can use during whatever autumn or the summer phase. Awesome! Blue wants to do some dancing as well. So first of all, he will spend a white guy or white resource to initiate the dancing action. I think he wants to dance over to, I don't know, this space here. This costs him 1 red resource, and I think he will totally go for this ceremonial card here because it gives him 1 victory point for each of those fishes that are worth 1 point pretty much. So let's grab this one right away, and because he already has 2 of those tokens, yeah, that's pretty much worth 2 victory points and maybe more. And of course, let's not forget to place his disc accordingly. Back to yellow. He totally wants to go gathering, so he will spend a brown stone here, and he will spend a yellow resource here in order to get this egg, which really comes in handy because he just completed another pair worth blue and a yellow action marker for summer or autumn. Red wants to do some hunting, so he will place a yellow resource onto this pillar here, and then he wants to have this rhino track cut here, so he will spend 2 blue and 1 brown resource. This gives him this card here, really crazy expensive, but this will pretty much trigger all of those cards as well. So he gets 1 yellow action marker, which he can use in summer right away. He gets 1 white resource, and he also gets an additional development point. I guess blue wants to do some fishing, so he will pay 1 white resource here. He will spend 1 red resource here. I think he's totally fine with this fish, worth 1 point for him. And on top of this, he will also move on this fishing track, so he gets now 2 victory points by the end of each summer phase. Actually, I think yellow wants to do the same thing here. He will go fishing with this one here. He will spend 1 here in order to grab this fish, because he also takes it away from the blue player, at least most likely. He will also advance here, so at least he will now produce 1 victory point by the end of each summer as well. Red passes. He only has 1 resource left, and I think he doesn't want to spend it. He may still use it during this autumn phase. So blue wants to go painting with this gray resource. He will spend 1 development point in order to turn this thing around. Then he will spend white and yellow in order to get this painting tile, which he will place accordingly, and therefore he made a connection, so he's getting 1 action marker. For his last action during spring, I think yellow wants to migrate, so he will spend this stone here. He will use the red one in order to bring 1 of his yellow dudes onto the map, and I think he will start here. Then everyone else will pass as well, so let's move into summer. Let's slide up everything accordingly. Blue has first dips, and I think he wants to go for those action markers. Then it's red, and I think he will go for those. And last but not least, it's yellow. He will take those stones. Then we can do our actions. Again, we start with the rock painting. Yellow is first, and yeah, I think he will go for 1 section here, and I believe he will take the Mustang. Red will do the same. He will pay 1 gray action marker and also will grab the Mustang. And for him, it's really looking incredibly good. So whatever, if he places something here, he gets this reward twice. If he plays something here, he gets this reward twice. So this is really the perfect section of the rock painting for him. And blue will also pay 1 action marker in order to paint this black hand here. And therefore he gets 1 red action marker as well. Nice. Let's do some gathering, or rather not. The only player who has 2 red resources is blue, but I think he wants to hold on to those because he's not really fancying any of those. They can really provide you a lot of points, so don't get me wrong, but right now I think he doesn't feel like it. Let's do some dancing, and I think the only player who really wants to dance during this phase is the red player. He has 3 yellow action markers, can you believe that? So he will totally go for this ceremonial card, which also gives him an additional development point. But what's more important, he already completed this goal, so he needs to complete this column of this rock painting, and this is pretty much worth 4 victory points by the end of the game. Nice job. Of course, let's not forget to place his disc, but right now it doesn't really change anything for him. This is now the case where, for example, the blue player could have stormed to the lead if he would have spent his 1 and only marker. And maybe he still should do that, to be honest. It's not done yet. He can still dance, and why not? Yeah, I think he will. So he will spend his 1 and only yellow action marker in order to get this ceremonial card, which pretty much gives him 3 points for each of these sets here. He's not too far away from that, so there is a good chance that he may be able to fulfill it. But because he was dancing again, he can now push pretty much the currently starting player to the back, so he will start the next round. Not really sure if that's totally important, because again, you get first dips on this whole summer action phase and so on. But yeah, I think overall maybe he does want to start, and yeah, this ceremonial card may be worth something either. Let's do some fishing, and again the blue player is incredibly unlucky. Yellow will go first, And he will totally spend his 2 blue action markers in order to get this fish here worth 2 points. So he will storm 1-2 positions forward. Next it would be red. He doesn't have any blue markers, and now it's blue, but again he only has 2 blue action markers as well, and he has not enough development points in order to trade them in for an additional one. Man, this really hurts like crazy. He would have been able to move to this position, would have gained him 1 additional victory point after each summer, but yeah. He silently swears towards the yellow player, but that's the name of the game. So maybe after all, turn order is important. He just learned that, but next round he will definitely the starting player. None of the players has any brown action markers whatsoever, so we can directly jump over to the migration step. And yeah, I think yellow will spend a white action marker to move his last meeple, maybe also here. Red will also send a meeple here, but he has to go to the central tile if I'm not mistaken. And so is blue. He will also spend a stone and he will go to the center. He could go here, but I think he'd rather not. And I also just noticed he should have 1 more of those meeples because he built an actual tent up there. So his total should be 4 meeples. Let's do some scoring. Blue gets 1 2 point and 1 development point. Yellow gets 1 point and 1 development point, and red only gets 1 victory point in total. But overall, that's not too bad. And then it's autumn time. We start with the yellow player. He will generate 5 movement points out of those 2 resources. That's a pretty cool return of invest. So he will move 1-2 spaces here and grab this mono. This is one that gives him 2 victory points by the end of the game. Always a nice thing. He still has 3 more movement points left. So he will now move 1-2 spaces here. This gives him an immediate, pretty much this stone back, an action marker which he can still use, which is nice. He still has 1 more movement point left. And with this, he will move his last meeple, at least in this corner, towards this camp tile here. And I think he will build a camp there. And I think he will go for this camp. He needs 3 meeples adjacent to each other pretty much. One of those meeples has to go away, and I think he will move or send this meeple back to his player board. So now let's flip it over accordingly. This gives him 3 victory points and 1-2 development points. And of course, he also gets an additional meeple. But he's not done yet. He just earned another yellow action marker, which he will spend right away in order to move 1 guy here. This gives him 1 blue resource cube, which he can use during his next spring phase. He has 1 more movement point left. And I think with this, he will move onto this tile here. So now he's adjacent to this monolith up there, and each figure around it is worth 1 victory point by the end of the game. So this could be worth 3 victory points for any combination of players. And on top of this, he has majority for this tile here. On top of this, I think he will also build this camp. He has to send this meeple back. So let's flip it over, and that's worth additional 2 victory points. Then it's red. He will spend 1 movement point with this white resource. That's still a resource cube he had left from this spring. He will also spend 1-2 development points, and this gives him 3 movement points in total. So that's 1, 2, and 3. And yeah, the idea of course is to build a camp down there, and I think he will go for this camp. So he has to send this guy home, but this also gives him 2 victory points and an additional meeple. I think he wants to spend the blue action marker now to move 1-2 spaces again. I think he will yet build another camp. This time he can leave this guy where he is, but this is now worth only 1 development point. But now both the blue and the red player are tied for this monolith here, so he's not leaving both of this to the blue player for now, and he may still consider moving here, and then red would have the majority around this monolith. I think blue wants to move only once, so he will spend 1 development point in order to move this guy here. And of course he will also build his cheap tent here, so he can leave this guy where he is. And on top of this, he gets his development point back. Not really sure if I want to spend any blue resource in order to move those guys as well, but right now it's really not looking good for him. So I think he will pass for autumn, so that's pretty much the end of the year. So let's do the winter setup once more. So again, let's turn the weather tile. I think he's still okay. No, he's not. Red will spend 1 development point in order to move this guy 1 step further this round. I hope that's a good idea, but I think it is. So again, let's assign the resource, and I will do all of those off camera again. This time blue will go first. He will go painting. He will pay red and brown resource in order to get this tile, and therefore he just earned this here. This triggers this connection, so he gets 1 brown action marker. Then it's yellow, and he really needs to go hunting, that's clear. So he wants to spend this cube here. He will spend 3 resources here in order to get this rhino. This is worth 2 points now, which he can score right away. And on top of this, he has really improved on this multiplier here, because this is now 3 points times 2. That's 6 points, this combination. So that's really not bad at all. Then it's red, and he wants to go fishing, so he will spend a blue stone. Not sure if that's a good idea. No, it's not a good idea. He will spend a gray stone here, because you don't want to leave too many similar stones, because this will really power up your summer abilities. And on top of this, he will spend 2 gray resources in order to get this fish, so he can now move 1-2 spaces up here. And this fish is also a nice addition for his end game scoring card here. I think blue wants to go fishing too. This is definitely worth it. So he will spend a brown cube here, and he will spend a gray cube here in order to get this level 1 fish, so he can move 1 step ahead. And because of his ceremonial card, this pile is really worth 4 victory points for him by the end of the game. I think yellow wants to go hunting again, and he will spend only 1 in order to get this Trex card here. It's not worth real victory points for him, but both of those cards will trigger, so he gets 1 additional brown action marker and an additional development point. As no one seemed to pay attention, I think red wants to go dancing, so he will spend a blue stone. He will spend a red stone here. Let's move him over there accordingly, and he will absolutely go for this ceremonial card. This is worth 1 victory point for each development point you have by the end of the game. Normally you get a 3-to-1 conversion. With this card you get a 1-to-1 conversion. Then it's blue, and I think he will go gathering with his blue stone, and he will go for those beans, and those beans are also worth 1 development point. And those resources or gathering tiles also give you a lot of victory points by the end of the game if you collect them as a set. So for example, 1 of those beans is worth 1 victory point, 2 of those is already worth 3 victory points, 5 victory points, up to 12 victory points if you collect 5 of those. Really some serious points you can get there. But you also want to get into sets in order to gain those bonus actions, so that's really something that you have to balance out or adjust according to your strategy. Yellow wants to go gathering as well, so he will spend a yellow one here. He will spend a brown resource in order to get those, I think, berries. So this will put it here. And for this ceremonial card, he's still looking for those olives here. So that's pretty much a nice combination. So if he gets those olives, maybe during the last round, this is already the second to last round. And if he manages this, then he at least gets all those action markers and will be able to fulfill his ceremonial card. Even though red still has 2 more resources, I think he wants to pass. He wants to store it for the autumn phase, because especially brown and blue are worth 5 movement points during autumn. So that's really not too bad. But I guess all the other players will pass as well. So again, we know the drill. Let's slide everything up, and this time red has first dibs on which of those awesome little action markers to go for. And I think, yeah, let's just go for the most stones. He cannot really use them that well, I believe, but it's better than nothing. No, he will go for those stones here because this gives him a second migration stone. But then it's yellow, and I think he will go for the, let's say, most action markers here. And last but not least, it's blue, and doesn't really matter, I believe. Yeah, let's go for this one here. And again, I forgot to place the red marker here next to the turn order track, but I'm really happy I'm catching this before it really matters. Then it's time to do some painting. Blue starts. He will totally give one gray stone away in order to paint the red hand here, which he can place like this. And yeah, he made another connection worth one additional brown action marker. Then it's gathering time. The only player with 2 red resources is blue again. And yeah, he will definitely go for this. He will take those nuts, which completes this set here worth blue and a white action marker. And then it's dancing time, and the only player with yellow stones or action markers is the yellow player, and he will place one here. This time I will not forget to place his disc accordingly. And with this one, I think he will go for this one here because he already has completed this card, but he still has to make sure to get some of those olives in the or during the last round later on. Fishing time, and yes, blue starts. He will spend 3 stones in order to get this fish here. This completes his task here. Maybe he can do that more than once, but he can also move his marker here 1, 2, 3 spaces ahead, so he gets 3 victory points and 2 development points each, or basically twice now. Yellow also wants to spend 1 fishing point in order to get this fish here. This just gives him enough to move to this one here, also worth some points sooner or later. And I think red, does he want to pass? Yeah, I think he wants to pass, at least for the fishing. Okay, it's hunting time, and now, yeah, blue again will spend 3 red markers here in order to get those tracks. So everything gets activated again. So he gets 1 gray resource, 1 brown action marker, and on top of this 1 additional development point, and the multiplier also went up. So it's now 3 times 2, 6 victory points. Unfortunately, the other players don't have enough brown action markers and they don't want to spend any development points. So we come straight to the migration phase, and blue will migrate 1 meeple here for 1 white action marker. And I think red wants to do the same, but he will send in 2 of his guys for 2 of those action markers. Let's do some scoring. Blue gets 3 victory points, 1, 2, 3, and 2 development points. And yellow gets 1, 2 points, red as well, and they both also get 1 development point. And keep in mind, for red, each development point that he holds by the end of the game is worth 1 victory point for him. Okay, blue is first. He wants to spend 5 movement points. Insanely expensive, but this will let him move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 movement points onto this tile here. This gives him the honey and 1 development point. And because he finished his set, he also gets a red and a white action marker, which he can use right away. And then he will spend his remaining resource from this spring. That's 2 movement points. He will also spend 1 development point, and I think this will let him move 1, 2, 3 spaces, and therefore he gets 1 yellow action marker right away. And then he will spend 1 point here. He will spend 1, 2, 3 development points, and this will let this guy move 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces here. And I think he will totally build a tent there too. Yeah, let's go for this one. This will send both of his dudes back, but this tent is also worth 1, 2, 3, 4 victory points. And because he built another tent, he also gets an additional meeple. Right now, blue and red are still competing over this monolith here. So I think he will spend yet another development point to let this guy move here. So right now it's 2 versus 1, and the tent always breaks any tie. So a tent is worth more than a simple meeple. Okay, back to yellow now. He will spend 1 movement point to move this guy here, and this will grab him the nuts. So he's now the first to build a stack here. So this stack of nuts is already worth 3 victory points. Then he will spend 1 development point to move his yellow meeple here, and this gives him a blue resource stick. And this blue stone is worth 3 incredible movement points this round. And I think he will spend it right away, plus 1 development point to move him 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces here in order to grab this tasty monolith here, also worth 2 more victory points. Last but not least, it's the red player. He will spend 1 movement point in order to move in here, and this also gives him 1 blue resource, which he can also use right away. It's worth 3 movement points, which is not bad. So then let's spend this one here. That's 3 movement points in total, and the idea is to build this tent. So he will move 1, 2 spaces here. He will have to send 1 guy home. That's clearly this guy. So let's build this tent, and that's worth 3 victory points plus 2, and those 2 are also worth 1 victory point each. And as he has still 1 movement point left, if I'm not mistaken, he will move this guy here in order to grab this monolith. And he has 1 more meeple, and I think he doesn't want to leave this monolith to the blue players. So he will spend, this is worth 2 movement points, so let's move this guy. Let's move him here for now. We don't have to spend all our movement points because this direction seems to be better for now. Let's see what comes out at the end of the next and last round, and that's already the end of the second to last round. So one last time we will set up the board again, and then we jump directly into the last round. Okay, one last time. Let's rotate the weather tile. Let's assign the starting resources, again off camera of course. Then it's time to do some spring action. This round red goes first, and he wants to go hunting, so he will spend 1 red in order to initiate the hunting action, and he really wants to go for that rhino up there, so I think he's paying with his white stone here. So let's grab this rhino, and this will trigger all those fancy things again. Again, 1 white stone here, or 1 resource here, 1 yellow action marker here, and 2 of those development icons, which are worth 2 victory points for him. Then it's yellow, and he wants to go hunting too. Yeah, why not? So he will initiate the hunting action with this gray stone here, and then he will spend 2 white and 1 blue icon in order to get this rhino tracks. Incredibly expensive, but for him it's definitely worth it. So let's do the math. So first of all, that's the multiplier. 3 times 3, that's 9 victory points. And of course he's getting this red resource, and he's getting a gray action marker, which he can use throughout this round, and especially important for the later autumn phase, because gray material is worth 3 movement points. For blue it's easy. He will go fishing. He will spend this one here. He will spend another one here in order to get this fish. This will bring him to this space, so he will score 4 points by the end of this summer. But what's more important, this fish is also worth 1 victory point for him because of this card here. Nice job. Then it's back to red. He wants to go gathering, so he will spend this yellow resource, and I think here he wants to go for those, I think it's olives, I really don't know, but for him that's a completed set, so he gets a blue and a white action marker. After seeing this, yellow is starting to panic, so he definitely also needs to go here. So he will spend spend 1 gray stone. Then he will have to spend 1 development point in order to turn this wheel 1 step further. And now he will be able to collect the olive here. First and for all, this completes the set. So he gets a gray and a red action marker. But this also helps him to complete this set here. So this is an additional 3 victory points for him. Awesome. Then it's blue, and I think blue wants to migrate. So he will spend this resource here. And he will now spend a yellow and a white stone, and this lets him migrate up to 3 of his meeples. And right now he exactly has 3 of those. And keep in mind, all of those have to go to the same location. So I think let's send those guys up there. Back to red. Red also wants to go fishing, and he will spend, I don't know, 2 red resources here in order to grab this fish, so he can also advance on this. So he would score 3 victory points. But this is also important because this fish is worth an additional victory point for him. I think red also wants to migrate, so he will spend this stone here. Not really a good idea, but I think is still okay for him. He also wants to migrate 3 meeples. So this is the gray stone. He will now spend 2 of his development point in order to generate a blue product or resource cube. Now he has basically enough to send 3 of his guys onto the map, and I think they will all start here. Yeah, sounds like a good idea. Blue wants to dance, so yeah, I don't know. Let's spend this one here. Let's not forget to place the disc, but now it doesn't really matter anymore. And I think let's have him dance over there. And this gives him this Mammoth Tracks card, which is worth 2 victory points because it's 4 times 2 now. And he will also trigger all of his development cards here. So he gets 1 brown action marker, 1 grain resource, and on top of this 1 additional development point, which you can use for the movement during autumn. Even though red still has 2 more resource cubes, I think he will pass for this spring. I think he wants to hold on to this for some later movement or so. Blue is also down to only 1 resource, and I think he will pass as well. And I think, yeah, the yellow player will do pretty much the same thing. So let's move into the summer phase. Let's slide everything up. Wow, there are really a hell of a lot of resources available now. Red is the first, no, blue is the first player to pick. And I think he will go for this pile. Pretty much that's 5 victory points if we will not spend those until the end of the game. So that's not bad at all. I think, yeah, yellow will also simply go for, yeah, we'll go for the most stones available. And last but not least, it's red. Yeah, and I think he will go for those. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, let's sit together and do some painting. Red would go first. Unfortunately, only has 1 gray stone. But I think in this case it might be worth it to spend 1, 2, 3 development points, even though that's victory points for him. But I think that's still okay. This will generate him 1 gray action marker. He still has 1 gray action marker. And I think with this he will go for this hunter on the lake or on the sea, I don't know. So he will place it here. This will trigger twice pretty much. So he will get 2 times this blue resource or action marker. Then it's yellow. I think he will also paint twice in order to gain the same tile pretty much. So he's nowhere close completing this tile. Not sure what he was thinking, pretty much what I was thinking. But still, we made a connection, so yellow is entitled to gain 2 development points. And this row is now worth 3 points instead of only 1. So it's definitely worth something. Blue will pass on the rock painting action, so we come to the gathering action. First is red. Red doesn't want to spend any resources, or he doesn't have any or enough action markers left. Then it's yellow, and I think yellow wants to spend 2. He will get those berries here. And this is the second set of berries, so this pile will also score him 3 points instead of only 1. And of course, he will get a development point for that. I think blue also wants to go gathering with 2 red resources, and he will go for those beans. And those are worth 2 victory points for him, net at least. Dancing time. Red goes first. He will definitely spend 2 yellow markers, and I think he will get this card. So pretty much each meeple later on a rock environment will gain 1 victory point. Of course, we will place the disc, but again, this doesn't matter anymore. Now I remember, huh? Then it's yellow. He will also go dancing, worth 2 points. Let's place this, and he will go for this. So each of those sets are now worth 2 victory points, and he has already 1 set of this. So that's pretty good for him. But in the end, he's pretty much trading 2 victory points for 2 more victory points. But at least here he has the possibility to gain some more points, in theory. Anyone for some fish? Red certainly is. He will spend 3 cubes now, or action markers, in order to get this level 3 fish. This gives him 1, 2, 3 steps. And keep in mind that those 2 development points he will gain are also worth 2 victory points for him. And he will also score a lot of points by the end of this summer. As yellow and blue are passing, we can move over to the hunting section, and red will pass here. He doesn't have any brown cubes whatsoever. Next is yellow, and I think he wants to go for this saber-tooth here. It's 3 points, so he has 2 stones, and I think he will spend 1, 2, 3 development points in order to generate a 3rd stone here. This will give him those saber-tooth. For this he will score an immediate 1, 2 victory points. But on top of this, those tracks have finally led him somewhere. So that's now 2 times 2, pretty much worth 4 victory points. Before that it was 0, so that was definitely a good move for him. Last it's blue, and he will most definitely also go hunting for 2 brown stones in order to gain the tracks to this mammoth here. So he's really doing good in respect to hunting. Everything will trigger again. So he will get a yellow resource, a brown action marker, another gray resource here, and on top of this 1 more development point. And then we migrate. Red goes first, and I guess he wants to send his one and only meeple to this location. I have to stand those guys up. I will do that after summer right away. Both yellow and blue are out of meeples and also partly out of white action markers, so we can directly skip into the after summer phase. So it's time to do some scoring. So red and blue are both getting 4 victory points. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and they also get 2 development points each. Yellow is getting 2 and 1 development point here. And now we move directly into autumn. Red is first. He will produce 2 movement points, 1, 2 spaces here. Right now he has the majority, and I think this will not change because all the other spaces are already occupied, so that's not too bad. And because of this card, those 2 meeples are also worth 1 victory point each. He will produce yet another movement point with his yellow one in order to move him onto this monolith. So this is now worth 2 victory points for him. So it's also the meeple that is on the space counts as well. And he has the majority for this monolith. So that's also worth 5 victory points. And because of his card here, this is also worth yet another victory point. That was pretty much the perfect move. Not sure if it's a good idea, but he will generate yet another 2 movement points here. 1 and 2. He will spend 1 development point in order to move him 1 space further. And I think that's more or less it for the movement of the red player. Then it's yellow. He will generate 3 movement points with his gray action marker here. So he will move 1, 2 spaces here, 1, 2, 1 space here. So that's 3 movement points. There he will create this tent, so he has to send both of those guys away. But this tent is worth 1, 2, 3, 4 victory points for him. Then he will spend his last 2 remaining development points in order to move this guy 1, 2 spaces down there. Here he will get 1 yellow action marker. And I think he will spend this yellow action marker in order to move this guy here in order to protect this monolith here. And on top of this, he also gets 1 gray stone back. So this was 1 victory point. This is another victory point. So overall, I think this was a good idea. By the way, I forgot to pretty much give every one of the players the right amount of meeples when they build their tents. I think during the last round or so, I really don't know. Blue should have at least one more, and I told you that during the last migration step he was not able to, but he had a meeple and he had a white stone. So I think it's fine, it's still fine. So I will also pay this white action marker in order to send his last meeple onto the board as well. I'm not really sure if it makes a difference. All the other players were really out from what I can remember, so I think this was the only real mistake that mattered, at least, and hopefully I was able to correct it properly. So let's see what he can do with that. So he will pretty much produce 6 movement points. That's insane. So he will move 1, 2 spaces here, 1, 2 spaces here. He still has 1 more movement point, or 2 more movement points left. So that's 1 more. And with this, he will simply move in here. This gives him 1 blue resource. And the idea is, of course, to build 1 tent. And he will go for the expensive tent here. So that's 1, 2, 3 meeples here, and this tent gives him 6 victory points, which is insane. With his last 2 resource markers, he really had a lot of those. He will now move 1, 2, 3 spaces here in order to grab those beans, which are worth some serious victory points for him. And yeah, that's pretty much the end of the autumn phase. Here is still a meeple, but I think he will pretty much pass on this. Yeah, it doesn't really make a difference. So let's do the final scoring. We start with the development points. That's 3 to 1. So that's 1, 2, 3, 1 point, 1, 2, 3, another point, and that's it for blue. Yellow is out here, and because red has this card, he can trade them in 1-on-1, so that's pretty much 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 victory points for him. Then it's 1 point for each action marker left, so that's 2 points for red, 4 points for blue, and 3 points for yellow. Then it's all about rock painting, so that's 6 points, 12 points, 13 points for red. That's definitely a good push for him. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The same is true for the blue player. He has a somewhat different constellation, but it's also worth 13 victory points for him. 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 44 points already. Here yellow has some serious issues. He only has 2 in 1 row, so that's pretty much 1, 2, 3 points for him. Then it's all about those gathering tokens. So that's 1 point, that's 1 point, so 2 points for red. That's 5 points plus 3 points, 8 points for blue. And he will be the first to make it over the 50 points mark. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But here yellow is doing pretty well as well. 3, 6 points plus 4, that's 10 points for yellow. So he's catching up again. Nice job, yellow. Now we score those animals. Red first, that's 4 times 1, 4 points for red. 2 times 5, 10 points for blue. And here yellow is doing pretty good too. So that's 4 points here. That's 9 points in total. 13 points for yellow. Then we do the monolith scoring. Let's start with those tokens here. This is the only token that the red player was able to collect. So that's 2 points for red. Yellow was able to collect 3 of those. So that's 6 more points. So 56 points. So he's really closing on to blue here, who doesn't have any of those tokens. But of course, we now also score the monoliths that are on the map. So let's start down here. Here clearly yellow is in the lead. So he scores 5 points and blue gets 2 points. This monolith here, it's a megalith. I think I was basically using the wrong term the whole game. It's pretty much worth 1 point for each occupying hex here. That's 2 for blue and 1 for yellow. This one clearly belongs to the red player, no other. Oh yeah, blue is around as well. So red scores 5 and blue scores 2. Here's another point for yellow. Those are pretty good. So that's the majority. No other player is around here. So that's 5 points for red. And this is basically 2 more points for red as well. So in total, he just scored 7 more points. So let's have a quick look at the current situation. So they're not too far from each other. But unfortunately, up here, blue is really scoring like crazy. Here he is alone. There he is alone, so that's 10 more points for blue alone. Here we have an interesting situation. Yellow is clearly in the lead with 5 points, and they pretty much share this one here, so they both get 1 point each. And this gives 1 point to the red player and 1 point to the yellow player. I believe those were all the megaliths that are out on the map. Let's do the scoring for the ceremonial cards. Again, let's start with the red player. And for this card, he will now score 1, 2, 3, 4 more victory points. Not too bad. For this card, he will score 1, 2, 3 more points. 1, 2, 3, coming closer. And last but not least, he will score 4 more points for this rock formation here. Then it's blue. Let's start with this set here. That's 1, 2, 3. Unfortunately, only one set, but it's still worth 3 victory points for him. And this is worth 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in total, 8 more points for blue, which is really insane. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And with yellow, it's interesting. This is not getting scored, unfortunately, but this one is. So he has 1 egg, he has 1 olive, so that's 2 points here. He has this set completed as well. That's 3 more points. And he also has completed this set here. So 3 more points. In total, 8 more points for yellow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's really the last item to score. So we have a clear winner with the blue player here. Yellow second and red on the last position. I was not thinking about this, to be honest. Pretty sure that's on me. I did not do the most perfect decision for most of the players. It's always a little bit tough to play 3 players at once, but the idea was to show you how this game is actually played and not how you best play this game. Okay, I really hope you enjoyed my little playthrough of Prehistory here. Keep in mind it's starting on Kickstarter anytime soon. As soon as it launched, I will definitely put a link to the campaign in the description of this video. And yeah, check out their website, check out BGG, subscribe to it, whatnot. It's definitely a fun game. I like it a lot. Very puzzly, but very deep, very rich in respect to theme. It really is a lot of fun. Hope to see you soon in one of my other videos, and yeah, until then, bye bye.